Hey everybody, Chief Meteorologist Brad Petovich here. A hot and dry Sunday. It's been a pretty nice weekend outside of the couple isolated showers we saw yesterday, but Monday, focus starts to turn back to some showers and thunderstorms, and in this case, some could be severe. So Monday's a day we want you to be weather aware, and I'll explain why here. This is a pretty potent storm system for this time of year. You know, in the summer, we get tons of heat and humidity, we get pop-up storms, but typically the jet stream and the other dynamics that we have in the spring and the fall and the other times of year are weaker. Well, this has been a weird summer. The jet stream has been a little bit further south and interacting with our area a lot more than we normally see during peak heating. And that's going to be the case. This is what we call a trough. It's an upper level low pressure system and front, and it's attached at the surface that's going to be moving east, and it's going to move into a very hot and very humid air mass. I mean, today it is going to be steamy. We're going to see low 90s. We're already in the 80s right now with dew points generally already in the 60s and 70s. Let's look at the dew points. Yeah, that's pretty humid air. So what fuels thunderstorms is heat and humidity at the surface. And if you have cold air aloft in the mid-number levels, which we will with this trough, that will prompt the risk for a severe storm. So let's get into this setup. So real quickly, the severe weather outlook for today, you can see the large area under that risk of low and medium to high in the red. And again, that's our low and high. We go a little bit higher than that depending on the setup. But that's a pretty big line of thunderstorms that'll be to our west today. Some could make a run at the Carolinas late tonight. But tomorrow you see the setup here. We've got a low risk for most of the area, a medium risk for most of the area, and then this little area of red. That's the area where I think we're going to see a heightened threat for severe weather tomorrow, especially late in the day. Now, we'll talk about the timing here, but think primarily there could be a couple rounds of storms dying in the morning, but this is late afternoon, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, that time frame, late afternoon and evening as this moves in. And I'll quickly show you the close-up look here. You see for our area, and we've got that risk of damaging winds and probably some hail as well. One of the things I do think we're going to see with this setup is probably a pretty decent hail setup with some of the stronger cells, but wind is by far going to be the biggest threat overall, damaging straight line winds. There is a low end tornado risk, especially if we get some isolated cells develop, but I think this will primarily transition to a wind and hail threat. Had to heighten the flood risk a little bit just because we had so much rain last week that if we do see some training or a couple storms in the same spot again and again, that could lead to some flash flooding. So let's get back to this and show you the Futurecast on how the timing of all this is going to work out. All right, so today, pool days, lake day should be fine. After church, heading outside should just be fine. We'll go into the afternoon hours. You do see this cluster of storms that kind of makes a run at the mountains by 4 or 5 o'clock. And that'll be interesting to watch because that might make it down into the upstate of South Carolina, maybe even in the Charlotte area, but it looks like it's weakening and falling apart. What's interesting about that isn't that, that's going to be a huge threat for severe weather. Sometimes that'll leave behind boundaries or change the atmosphere for tomorrow's round, which is actually going to be developing back at here. You can see that developing in the Midwest and the Ohio Valley this evening. So this first line is going to kind of fall apart. This next one heading our way could make a run at us overnight as well. And just like the one that comes in this evening, this one overnight and early Monday might change the dynamics in the atmosphere. So that's why there's still some uncertainty in this setup. You see 5 a.m., we could have a broken or dying line of showers and storms moving through and they fall apart. Now, typically when this happens in the summer, when we see that early on, this eats up all the instability. So early in the day, we're not going to see anything develop. And this is why I think the timing is really going to be late Monday afternoon or Monday evening, because that first batch in the morning will kind of stabilize the atmosphere temporarily. But remember, it's going to be hot again tomorrow, low 90s possible. So things start heating back up by midday. And as we get into mid-afternoon, 4 o'clock, we start seeing thunderstorms develop. Now, these are the ones we have to watch coming off the mountains here. If there's an isolated cell or two that develops into what we call a supercell, then we could see some small rotation. But remember, supercells also produce big hail. So these could be big hailers, we like to call them, developing by 5, 6 o'clock. And you see that cluster developing right there. So again, to me, that's the time frame, that kind of 5 and then 6 o'clock, 7, 8. Look at those clusters, 9, 10. So this is going to be a late day event. But remember, again, if that first batch in the morning does something down here, it could lead to more of a threat to the north. Remember that risk. That risk tomorrow has been primarily up in this area. So I'm going to overlay the radar and the risk area. So this area from Richmond down to Asheboro is an area to watch. And to kind of allude to that, I'm going to show you our Futurecast, which is a separate piece of guidance we use here in-house. So I'm gonna play this and I'm gonna pause it, and I'll show you that cluster of storms coming in tonight. Let me move my head so you can see the time here. You see it moving down and falling apart. That's late tonight and overnight. And then tomorrow we wake up to nothing and then sunshine. Look at the storms. Look where they develop on our run, kind of more up in this area. So this will be fascinating to watch if this area, which is highlighted by SBC, or this area sees any storms. There's some question marks down here. This looks to be more of a certainty. So that's why there's still not 100% confidence in where the most severe storms are. But because of the setup, I think we got to watch the whole area equally. And again, some of the other guidance like you're seeing here is clearly showing that. And again, what I think is going to be the concern tomorrow is probably the first batch of storms here maybe becoming supercells, and then it transitions into more of what we call MCS, mesoscale convective system, which is a fancy term for a cluster of thunderstorms. And when we see those, that typically means straight line winds, because what you're going to see is this big arcing line of storms, and maybe one down here and one here and one up here. Anytime you see those, they bow out like that. That's usually an indication of strong outflows or very strong winds. So that would be the indication that we're going to get damaging winds with this. And this could last into Monday evening. So, and really transition to a pretty large system as it moves to the coast on early Tuesday. So let me loop this whole thing. This is a 48-hour loop. Kind of shows you the cluster of storms. And it could be a couple waves. Again, the first waves tonight and early tomorrow, probably not as much. But during the heating of the day, Monday, if we get sunshine for several hours and it's 90+ degrees on Monday, got to be weather aware. So remember, we are definitely going to be weather aware tomorrow for the potential for these strong storms. The timing late afternoon into the evening. Wind and hail threat is medium. 2-inch possible diameter hail. Flooding medium, and tornado threat is low, but there could be some rotating storms. So stay weather aware. I'll post updates again tonight, and we'll have you covered on Monday as we get ready for what is a kind of a rare kind of setup for midsummer here in the Carolinas.